You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and today we're turning up the heat. Well, actually, two criminals are turning up the heat, scorching their family ties by starting fires to harm their loved ones. And you thought Thanksgiving dinner about politics was bad. At least your uncle didn't start the table on fire. And you guys, if he did, you need to send me the story. Now, our two stories are centered outside Chicago and Buffalo, New York. Two men who couldn't emotionally regulate and instead burned the house down. Let's start with the less harmful arson in Chicago that occurred on Thanksgiving Day in Beach Park. That's a fairly quiet north suburb of Chicago where leaf piles currently line the streets and Bears fans are living the high life with their winning NFL record. Now, it was on the holiday evening at about 7 p.m. when the Crump family home, that's a two-story with a wraparound porch, just erupted into chaos. Because 21-year-old Eric Crump, who lives in the home and was there to celebrate for the holidays, allegedly doused the roof of the home in gasoline and struck a match. All of this over a dinner tussle. Now, allegedly, the lanky 21-year-old had been causing some mischief at dinner. Eric, who has a spotty work history and a minor rap sheet, had been poking at his relatives for most of the afternoon. The emotions ramped up when at about 6 o'clock, Eric started yelling and the phrase, ungrateful freeloader, was being thrown around. At this point, some of the relatives had had enough, so they called 911 and said Eric was out of control. When deputies showed up to the home, they did their best to calm everyone down, but they did tell the relatives that no arrest of Eric could be made because, being a tool during dinner was not a crime. Well, after deputies left, it is alleged that someone in the family told Eric he would have to leave for the night. That declaration followed with slamming doors and then a full-on meltdown by Eric. The meltdown was so loud, neighbors could hear the outburst. By 6:30, Eric's mom, Lisa, in a shaky voice, phones 911 telling the dispatcher that her son is, quote, losing it and threatening to burn us out. Now, 48-year-old Lisa is a nurse. And I'm guessing, like most nurses who've done the profession for years, well, I bet she's seen a thing or two. But she is reportedly pretty worked up on this 911 call, and police returned taking the threat by Eric seriously. When deputies arrived, Eric had already run to the backyard shed, grabbed a red gas can, and Eric's uncle and cousin told deputies they witnessed Eric splashing gas on the eaves of the home from his bedroom window. Police reports say he kept muttering, "This ends now," while spraying the gas on the siding and the roof of his parents' home. The uncle and cousin said Eric grabbed a lighter out of his pant pocket and lit the trail of fluid on the house. Well, the Beach Park fire crew descended on the home as the remaining guests ran to the street for safety. And allegedly, Lisa stood watching the flames gut her garage with a family photo album cradled in her arms. Deputies say who they believe to be Eric standing near the property line with a knife in his hand. Well, they saw him, but as they approached him, he took off running through backyards in the neighborhood. Deputies set up a perimeter and used a canine to track Eric's scent, but the canine lost the scent, leaving deputies to believe at some point Eric got into a car and fled. Eric was later found hiding in a storage facility. He was arrested and charged with arson, and in Chicago, that's a Class 1 felony with a possible sentence of 4 to 15 years. He has additional charges of criminal damage to property and domestic battery. But in this case, no one was physically harmed in the fire. All the relatives were able to escape before the flames engulfed a portion of the home. But Sheriff John Eidelberg did relay in a statement that it was nothing short of a miracle that no one was harmed or killed in the senseless act. Now, in an interview with the Chicago Sun-Times, Lisa, sporting a bandaged hand that had been cut on broken glass, well, she said this about her son. "He was our boy. Troubled, yeah, but still family. We kicked him out of the house after the yelling, thinking that would give him a chance to cool down. Next thing we know, our house is a bonfire. Why, Eric? We loved you." And then Eric's father, Mike, echoed his wife's statement saying, quote, "Thanksgivings are for thanks, not this. He was arguing over nothing, chores and money. Then, boom. We're safe now, but homeless. His father then asked for others to pray for his son, saying he needs help more than hate. And Eric's 19-year-old sister went to TikTok, saying she watched her life burn from that lawn. Then she said, Eric, if you hear this, get right. We forgive, but damn. Now, Eric's bond is set at $250,000, which neither Eric nor anyone else helped him post. The sheriff hinted that Eric may have been off his prescribed psychiatric medication, which could have been the catalyst for the arson attack. Now, hold on to your extinguisher, because if you think a ruined Thanksgiving is the worst way a family holiday can end, just pause. Because 3 weeks earlier, and 700 miles east of Chicago, a brand new mother and her 4-day-old son never got the chance to celebrate anything ever again, and arson was again the crime of choice. On October 18th, Katie Carrig was a radiant and exhausted 29-year-old mother. She had just returned home from the Sisters of Charity Hospital with her newborn son, Noah, tucked safely in her arms. Katie was working her way through adulthood, serving coffee in the morning hours and attempting nursing school in the evenings. 30-year-old Kadane Hell worked as a financial aid advisor at the University at Buffalo. Now, the outside world might have seen a young couple trying to stumble their way through those early days of parenthood. Sleepless, a little unsure of what exactly baby Noah might need, and Katie's friends told investigators it wasn't that. They said Kadane was allegedly just too much. Katie told friends he smothered her with his possessiveness. That Friday in October, the arguing between Katie and Kadane started early. One neighbor told police at about 7:30 a.m. she heard raised voices and then a slammed door. The neighbor said she was sure Kadane left the apartment. When police started digging, they learned he did leave, but came back an hour later with a jug in his hand. 5 minutes after his return to the apartment, smoke detectors began blaring. Multiple neighbors phoned 911 as black smoke billowed from the apartment's first floor windows. Firefighters arrived 8 minutes after the first sign of smoke. As they broke through the front door, they found Katie on the living room floor, dead, with marks around her neck. Down the hall, in one of the bedrooms, little 4-day-old Noah laid lifeless in his bassinet. Firefighters quickly learned they had 2 dead bodies and a fire that had been deliberately started in 3 different places. There was a part in the living room, then in the hallway, and grotesquely, directly under the bassinet. But where's Kadane? Well, he was just hanging out in the apartment, hoping for the smoke and flames to take his life. Firefighters rescued Kadane, and he was transported to a local hospital where he spent the next few days being treated for smoke inhalation. 2 weeks after the arson attack, Kadane was indicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of second-degree murder, first-degree arson, and also an enhanced charge of endangering the welfare of a child. Prosecutors believe Kadane strangled Katie, left her dead on the living room floor, and left his 4-day-old child alone in a bassinet while he went and purchased an accelerant to feed the fire. An hour later, he returned with that accelerant in the jug and dumped it in the 3 places in the apartment. Prosecutors believe little Noah died from smoke inhalation. That will be determined after his autopsy, but that's their going theory now. Katie's mother, Maria Carrig, well, she stood outside the courthouse the day of the new indictment and spoke through sobs, saying the following. She sent me a picture of Noah at 6 o'clock that morning. He was awake, those big eyes staring at the camera. She wrote, Mom, he smiled at me for real this time. Well, 2 hours later, my daughter and my grandson were gone. I keep that photo as my phone background now. Every time it lights up, I remember that was the last happy moment she ever had. Now, prosecutors have said no plea deal will be offered in this case. Kadane is in jail with no possibility of parole currently. He does have a pretrial conference scheduled for today. I'll keep you updated on this case. And in our first 2 stories, we have 2 homes that should have been filled with love, and 2 homes that were burned, scarred, and destroyed, and 2 men who could not just walk away. Let me know what you think of these cases in the comments section. Now, should we carry on with our theme? Men who just couldn't walk away? This time in the workplace in Hutchinson, Minnesota, a tight-knit farm community of 14,000 people. Within that community, Amber Check was born and raised. In July of 2005, Peter and Angela Check welcomed Amber into their very traditional home. Peter was a steadfast factory worker, and Angela stayed home to primarily care for the family. Amber was the middle of 3 kids, her older brother Caleb and her younger sister Zoe, racing through the house together in those growing up years. Both Peter and Angela's parents lived somewhat close, and as mentioned, this was a very traditional, loving home. Amber was a firecracker, though. At 5 feet 6 inches tall, she wasn't scared of much. At St. Anastasia Catholic School through 6th grade, she was the kid who organized recess kickball leagues. Her knees were scraped from dives for the win, and by Hutchinson High School, class of 2023, she was the varsity Tigers basketball star, a point guard with a crossover that left defenders in the dust, averaging 12 points a game her senior year and earning all conference nods for her, quote, unyielding drive. This was as her coach later told the Star Tribune. Now, during high school, Amber began showing interest in welding. It was a way for her, gritty attitude and her artsy personality to, meld together. After graduation, Amber dove into a 10-month welding tech program at Alexandria Technical and Community College, emerging in May of 2024 with honors, top of her class in MIG-TIG techniques. Her final project, a flawless stainless steel sculpture of a soaring eagle that her instructors still point to as, quote, the one that flew the highest. Now, the college president said in a statement that Amber's commitment to excellence and her passion for her craft left a lasting impression on those around her. The president then went on to say she wasn't just learning a trade, she was igniting a revolution, one spark at a time. Now, during her education and also for the last few months, back in Hutchinson, Amber would volunteer at St. Anastasia, teaching welding basics to middle school girls during youth group. She once told the youth group the following: girls can build anything, even their own damn stars. Well, following her schooling, Amber began working at Advanced Process Technologies. This is a fabrication facility located in Kokata, Minnesota. And you know me, I had to look it up. This fabrication plant is actually pretty cool. They tailor business solutions for companies. So I would contact this plant and say, hey, I want this machine to do this thing in my business. And at Advanced Process Technologies, the over 150 employees make that a reality. They fabricate a ton of machinery for the dairy and cheese industry, including the Idaho Milk Association, a little shout out from my home state. But they also do small projects for businesses as well. Anyway, they have been around for 25 years in their set location and even more years prior to that. And for Amber, this looks like a pretty good fit for a job. Well, on the morning of November 11th, 20-year-old Amber was working her regular shift. She had spent the weekend with family and was up and at it again by 5:54 a.m. that morning. Amber, wearing her steel-toed boots and her flame-retardant jacket, had settled into her workstation in the fabrication bay, surrounded by welding jigs and flying sparks that, dance like fireflies. Her supervisors had been impressed with her artful work ethic. One foreman said she had a steady hand on the trigger, and she was known to be able to bead smooth seams on dairy tanks and other equipment. Now, while Amber began working, across the bay was 40-year-old David Bruce Long. David had been employed at the fabrication plant since 2018. And see, David's got an issue with Amber. He's been there for years. Yet here is a young female Amber who is turning the heads of her supervisors with her talent behind a blowtorch, and David hasn't done much but show up and do mid-level work. David's coworkers told reporters that his workstation was always messy, and he was often sullen and isolated. Those same coworkers said in the few times he did share information, he had recently been grumbling about the, quote, new girl. He also allegedly told coworkers that when Amber first started, she gave him a, quote, bad look while they were in the break room one day. And it seemed David had allowed that interaction to fester, almost blooming like a rust spot on metal as their work days went on. Here's the deal with the Advanced Process Technologies worksite. It can be a dangerous job. And because of that, APT has cameras everywhere. On that Tuesday morning, David can be seen on camera pausing at his grinder to put on his gloves, and then he grabs a sledgehammer. Okay, that's not weird. This would be exactly what David would be doing if he was working on a project. But David then allegedly turns away from his workstation and towards Amber's station 20 feet away. David, his heavy boots thudding across the work floor, allegedly raised the 10-pound hammer and with an arcing blow slams the cold iron into Amber's head. The blow knocks Amber to the floor, and David allegedly raises the weapon several more times, hammering away at her skull and her shoulder as she lay there defenseless. David then just drops the sledgehammer to the concrete floor. He stands upright, wipes some sweat from his brow, and turns from the bloody scene, sauntering back to his workstation. A 35-year-old coworker, Mike Harlan, who has just arrived for his work shift, drops his thermos full of coffee to the work floor and kneels next to Amber. Allegedly, Mike yelled, "What the hell?" before fumbling under Amber's collar to check for a pulse. Mike grabbed his phone and he dialed 911 at 6:03 a.m. 7 minutes later, deputies rushed into what should be a frantic scene. But instead, they find David just fumbling about his workstation like it's a normal morning, like he didn't just allegedly brutalize a young female coworker. As deputies cuffed David, he allegedly muttered, "I hit her with your hammer, Mike. She's gone." When paramedics tried to offer aid, they found Amber already gone, just like David said. When David was later interrogated at the police station, he allegedly openly admitted to authorities that he had been the one to administer the fatal blows to Amber. It seems he said the following: "I didn't like her. That bad look she gave me months ago, it stuck. Been planning this for some time." Well, David was charged with second-degree intentional murder. If those charges stick, he faces up to 40 years in prison. He was hit with a $2 million cash bail. David is currently still behind bars. And then, following all of that, more information began to surface. According to online reports, Amber had previously, in the weeks leading up to the murder, spoken to HR multiple times about David's bizarre behavior towards her. One coworker under anonymity told the Pioneer Press that when Amber took the strange behavior to HR, she was told to let it go, and that her only options were to document his behavior and leave it alone. Which, according to this coworker, she actually did. She documented an entire file folder worth of information about his bizarre behavior. Amber's family has released a statement about her murder. Her Aunt Jenny Lamont said the following: "Our Amber, witty, positive, beautiful, was taken in a place meant for building, not breaking. She dreamed of welding worlds together. Now we weld our grief into strength." And then in an interview with KSTP, Amber's dad, Mike, said Amber used to call home after a particularly good shift at the factory and tell her dad about the beads she had nailed that day while working on the manufacturing of the equipment. Then Amber's mom, Angela, broke her silence and told the Pioneer Press that HR knew, that everyone knew about David's bizarre behavior. She said Amber deserved better. Well, days after the murder, a GoFundMe was established in Amber's memory. More than $115,000 from over 2,000 donors has been raised to help establish scholarships for women welders. Reading the comments on the GoFundMe, there are several from other trade unions, money they gathered from union members to aid Amber's family and also to help memorialize her talent with the scholarships. And then the local Culver's restaurant raised $1,800 in 3 hours to add to that scholarship aid. Amber's headstone is marked with the words, "Sparks Eternal." You guys, welding was everything for this young woman. She took so much pride in her work. At her funeral, reference after reference was made to the welding profession. Well, last week, a judge did order a psych evaluation on David, this per his defense attorney's request. A grand jury is potentially convening, and David has yet to enter a plea. The results of the potential grand jury indictment will help determine if the charges will be raised from second-degree murder. And in a pretty damning commentary on Facebook, one of David's cousins wrote that the family cut him off years ago due to fears for their safety. The cousin wrote that David's actions proved that their cutting off was warranted. The cousin then goes on to say how heartbroken they are for Amber's family. Across the nation, a swell of support for Amber and also a tsunami of demands by females in the trade has erupted. NAWICs wrote that Amber is not alone, that 6% of welders are women, and 100% of them face threats in the workplace. They then resolutely claimed human resource dismissals kill people. So this led me to look into workplace violence. And you remember that term going postal? Well, that originated in 1986 when 44-year-old Patrick Sherrill killed 14 people and wounded 6 others in an Edmond, Oklahoma post office. Patrick apparently had beef with his coworkers, and the violence wasn't just random ammunition being sprayed throughout the postal room. Patrick systematically went from desk to desk, deciding if he was going to execute that person or that person. Then in 2010, 34-year-old Omar Thornton was called into the office to face disciplinary action for stealing cases of beer. See, his bosses had video evidence of his sticky finger activities, and so he was given a choice: resign or be fired. Omar signed his resignation paperwork and then pulled a gun from his lunchbox and began killing people. Again, it was targeted. Omar almost hunted people through the halls of the distribution plant. He killed 8 people before calling 911 and telling the operator that he killed 5 racists that were bothering him. He then ended his own life with his weapon. Then the other workplace violence attack that stood out to me. It occurred in 2000 at Edgewater Technologies in Massachusetts. The day after Christmas, software tester Michael McDermott walked into his office frustrated that the IRS was going to collect over $5,000 in back taxes. And his workplace, well, they knew about it since the money would be garnished from Michael's wages. Michael carried 3 weapons hidden in a duffel bag into the office that day. He went straight to HR and shot the 2 women in charge of payroll. One woman was on the phone with her mother at the time, and her mother heard the nightmarish violence unfold. Michael then walked the halls, allegedly looking for coworkers who had, quote, ruined his life. He killed 7 in total, 4 women and 3 men, before sitting down in the lobby and patiently waiting for law enforcement to arrive. When they did, Michael surrendered without resistance and reportedly said, "I'm the one you're looking for. They're all dead." Now, Michael is still in prison at the age of 67. You guys, workplace violence is real. In fact, I bet you listeners have stories, and let me know in the comments. And I will keep you updated on Amber's case. And finally, I always promise updates, and this update seems to match our theme for today: males who couldn't control their emotions toward females. Now, last Monday, we talked about Anna Kepnar, the 18-year-old from Titusville, Florida, who died on the cruise ship Carnival Horizon. Her body was found under a cabin bed covered in life jackets that had been drug from the cabin closet. She was sharing that room with her 16-year-old step-sibling and her 14-year-old younger brother. When I last reported, we had learned through a divorce settlement of Anna's stepmom that Chantel Hudson, okay, that's Anna's stepmom, had asked the courts to pause the custody case because the 16-year-old, who has now been identified as Tim Hudson, was being looked at as the prime suspect in the death of his step-sibling, Anna. Okay, make sure you're following me here. Tim, her step-sibling, was sharing a cabin with Anna, and Chantel, the mom of Tim, the stepmom of Anna, felt like Tim could incriminate himself if he was asked to provide any information in the custody case. All right, so I went to production. Thanksgiving happened. I snuggled my beautiful little grandson, and more information since then has become available. The Miami-Dade medical examiner has ruled Anna was murdered by mechanical asphyxiation, most likely an arm bar hold across her neck. Following that confirmation, Anna's extended family members started speaking out. And through those interviews, we learned about a previous experience that Anna had with Tim. Now, the actual court filings are sealed since Florida requires that because Tim is a minor. But here's what family and friends are reporting happened. According to Stephen Weston, okay, we've done a lot of names here. According to Stephen Weston, he's the father of Anna's ex-boyfriend, Joshua Weston. Joshua's a fellow Titusville teen who dated Anna for several months earlier this year. Okay, so that guy's dad. Stephen says the event happened during a late night FaceTime call around 3 a.m. somewhere in the early months of 2025, approximately February per timelines in all of the reports. It seems Joshua was on the video call with Anna while she was at her home in Titusville, and Anna was in her bedroom. Apparently, Anna had fallen asleep mid-conversation, leaving her phone on, completely activated. The call is still happening, and the camera is facing her on the bed. Steve Weston claims Joshua witnessed the following. Tim allegedly entered Anna's room uninvited. He walked toward the bed and climbed on top of Anna. Anna was allegedly asleep and was not aware of what was happening. Stephen says Joshua started yelling through the phone, and this alerted Anna to what was going on. Apparently, Tim then fled the room. Stephen told the publication that Tim was infatuated with Anna. He used the word obsessed to describe Tim's behavior. Stephen says Joshua had a conversation with Anna's father, Christopher, and her stepmom, Chantel, that's Tim's mom. But Stephen says they told Joshua he couldn't be believed, that his story was a bunch of hogwash, and they just dismissed the whole entire interaction. All right, this all got worse when Anna's biological mother, Heather, again, we've got so many names going on here, Heather Wright told TMZ that she had held conversations with Chris, that's Anna's dad, about Tim's behavior. But she told TMZ all of her concerns were downplayed as well. She also said that Anna had begun sleeping in the dining room of the home in order to not be in a closed bedroom where Tim's behavior could be easily hidden. That way Tim, maybe couldn't come in or couldn't bug her in her room. If she's out there, then it's in the open. Okay, remember, all of what is happening is just accusations, but this is new information. Family members are showing frustration about no charges being filed against him. Anna's aunt told ABC News the following. She fought for her life. Why have no charges been filed? And Anna's dad, Chris, told Fox News that he is completely open to his stepson being punished if he is found guilty. He also declared in that interview that there was an amount of time where Tim and Anna were the only two in the room together. Hey, remember, this after Anna returned to the crew's cabin room during dinner because she just wasn't feeling well. And then later, the two teen boys went back to the same room. During that time, it seems the 14-year-old, that's Anna's biological brother, he changed into some swim trunks and then he left the room to go enjoy the last few hours of playtime before they went to sleep. Well, when that boy left for the pool and Anna was still in her bed, Tim was still in the room. And for those of you that commented in the last episode about how weird it is that step-siblings, one female, one male, were sharing a room, I tell you, there is no consensus here. Some of you say that that's totally normal, that it even happened in your own blended families. But others are like, absolutely not. They shouldn't have been sharing a room. And that crowd that's saying absolutely not, Well, it includes Anna's biological mother, who told TMZ that having the two sleep in the same cabin was a form of neglectful parenting. All right, as a reminder, the case is being handled by the FBI, and according to the FBI, there is not a current threat to anyone else. At least that's what they're saying. So if there is not a threat, they will probably take their time analyzing evidence and shoring up their case, if they have one. Now, I'll keep you updated as more comes out. In the meantime, let me know in the comments, should step-siblings be sleeping in the same cabin? All right, finally, one last update. Remember the crazy story I told you about the 38-week-old pregnant mom, Rebecca K. Park, who left her mom's home on November 3rd. Her mom telling police she got in a dark Honda or Toyota sedan, and she hadn't heard from her since. And then her mom found her phone discarded in a field. That was sketchy. And when I brought you this story, Rebecca, the pregnant woman, and her unborn baby had yet to be found, but savvy internet users had shown how Rebecca's baby daddy was Rebecca's mother's ex-boyfriend. And that baby daddy / ex-boyfriend of Rebecca's mom / supposed ex-fiance of Rebecca, well, his name is Richard Fowler, and he is 43 years old. Rebecca was 22 at the time of her disappearance, and Richard's 43. And Richard also has a history of SA with a minor. Okay, here's the update. 21 days after Rebecca went missing, a search party was fanning out over the Manistee National Forest. As the boots of the searchers crunched through the fallen leaves, Rebecca's father spotted something in the distance. It was a body, partially covered in underbrush off a remote trail just 5 miles from Rebecca's mother's door. Remember, allegedly the last place Rebecca was seen. Now the body, eventually verified via DNA, looked like Rebecca, including the small tattoo above her eye with her middle name, Kay. But missing from the crime scene was Rebecca's baby. Her unborn, obviously now born son was nowhere to be found. All right, so have they arrested anyone? Yeah, they have, but not for Rebecca's murder. On November 25th, the ex-fiance, ex-boyfriend of the mother, remember his name is Richard, was pulled over on N55 near his hometown, which is about 10 miles from Rebecca's mom's house. Police said he had a broken taillight, so that is why they pulled him over. All right, we all know there was more there. But police brought out the canine, and that canine alerted on the white Ford F-150 that Richard was driving. So they searched the truck, and they found 2 grams of methamphetamine in baggies. Also, there was paraphernalia, like a scale, and also they found $1,200 in cash. So Richard was booked into the Wexford County Jail on 2 felony counts of delivery and intent to manufacture meth. And here's the deal. He's a repeat offender, so these charges are enhanced. Richard is still in jail since he hasn't posted bond. But you guys, we've seen law enforcement use this tactic before. I'm not sure if they're using it here, but if your suspect is jailed, you don't have to follow him and he can't be out destroying evidence. Again, no assumptions here, but if it walks and quacks, then you know the rest. That isn't the only arrest that has happened, though. Rebecca's younger sister, 22-year-old Kimberly Sue Park, was also arrested, this one at her home. Now, this arrest was kind of quiet. She knew it was coming. Cops and her had been talking, and she was booked on 3 felonies: tampering with evidence, filing a false police report, and lying to a peace officer during a violent crime investigation. For me, that's the key word there, violent crime investigation. Now, law enforcement aren't saying if these charges for Kimberly are related to Rebecca's case. But again, if it walks and quacks, then you can fill in the rest. Kim's lawyer did tell the court that Kim is cooperating with law enforcement. All right, as of right now, that's where it lands. No baby boy has been found. Rebecca's family is wonky at best, and 2 people directly connected to Rebecca are jailed. I'll keep you updated on this case as well when more information is made available. Oh my goodness, you guys, this is a long episode. So really quick, let me just answer one listener who mentioned the bands my son loves. Like I said in the last episode, I was wearing a band t-shirt for Sleep Token. That's my son's new favorite band. And for the longest time, Breaking Benjamin held that coveted slot, but Sleep Token might be winning out now. Well, on YouTube, Tanya, and I think that's her name, I'm so sorry if I get it wrong, but Tanya asked if he's ever listened to Highly Suspect or Nothing More. Those are 2 different bands. When I asked him, he straight away knew both bands and he has songs that he likes from both. So Tanya, the answer is yes. And to all of you that were outraged over the Liberty High School wrestling hazing in Peoria, Arizona, I get you. Your outrage is heard. Please let there be justice in that case. All right, that's your Monday episode of Rise in Crime. Thank you for being here. Please share this episode with a friend. And I love to talk about the cases that are spiking your interests. Our middle case today, the one about the man who walked across the fabrication floor and allegedly killed his coworker. Well, that was sent to me by a listener. I would have never run across that case, and it was incredibly interesting. So please send me your local cases. I love to cover those. And please give us a 5-star review, a positive comment, a like, a follow. Do all of this on our social media and our YouTube accounts. Those 3 podcasts that we have here at Ono Media are Murder with My Husband, Into the Dark, and, of course, Rise in Crime. Join me again on Thursday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.